The American presidents were people like you and like me, or at least that's how the founders intended them to be. Hi, my name's Teddy Abbey. Welcome back to my reoccurring segment where we're talking about the nicknames of the US presidents from the past. Last time we talked about President number 16, Abraham Lincoln's three most popular positive nicknames, which was easy since he's one of the most popular presidents of all time. But today we're going to be talking about his three most popular negative nicknames, insults made up specifically for him. Because just as he had crowds of admirers, he also had his fair share of enemies. We'll hop right into negative nickname number one, where he was very often called King Abraham.
Estimable colleagues, 2 bloody years ago this month, His Highness King Abraham Africanus I.
Now, this nickname came from primarily Confederates, Northern Confederate sympathizers, and slave owners that used it in speeches and political cartoons and in the newspapers. The nickname accused him of abandoning his Republican political base and saying that he behaved more like a tyrant than anything. This majorly comes from his decision to suspend the writ of habeas corpus in border states and other regions during the Civil War. To provide a little context here, habeas corpus is a fundamental constitutional court order. It essentially demands that when an individual is arrested by law enforcement in the United States, before they are subjected to long-term confinement like prison, they must appear before a judge so law enforcement can make their case for why the person needs to be imprisoned.
This staffing is in compliance with the Supreme Court answering your request for a writ of habeas corpus regarding your medical treatment or lack of it since you've come here.
With the writ of habeas corpus being suspended, law enforcement under the Lincoln administration could detain people without bringing them before a judge and explaining why. Now, the Lincoln administration said that this was because the Union was in a state of complete disarray, a civil war, obviously, and that extreme measures needed to be taken to ensure that Confederate saboteurs and sympathizers couldn't just wreak havoc in the North. But for Lincoln, a man who was celebrated for his morals, it really was a bad look to sacrifice this kind of civil freedom for the sake of civil safety. But what's worse than that is his implementation of martial law in certain areas. At first, the Union Army was almost an entire volunteer army, but as the war dragged on for years, drafts had to be implemented, and there were a series of very nasty draft riots in New York City during Abraham Lincoln's term, and he cracked down on them hard. And while he maintained that his administration had to do this to keep the Union from crumbling, critics say that the emergency powers granted to him by the Republic wasn't enough, and that it was easy to accuse him of gathering and consolidating all of this constitutional power under his singular authority.
The power you give me, I will lay down when this crisis has abated.
Historians even today debate the necessity of Lincoln's actions and whether they even helped keep the Union solid during these latter days of the Civil War. This negative nickname encapsulates the real honest fear of people that Lincoln would become that tyrant king that many in the South were afraid he already was.
You remember when your pappy and I rode out to defend our way of life from the tyrant Lincoln?
And that fear will push us into negative nickname number two, a rather macabre negative nickname where he was often called the Hangman. Regardless of what era, military justice in wartime is harsh. And Lincoln's military administration was no different. Lincoln authorized and presided over the summary executions of the Union's own deserters, spies, and saboteurs caught by the Union's military justice. While Lincoln himself didn't carry out the executions and wasn't there specifically for all of them, through his own established military commissions and commanders, the orders came down the chain. And when you're the President of the United States, the buck stops at you.
I'm the president, and as they say, the buck stops here.
Additionally, certain civilians complained that they were judged disloyal and treated terribly by the Lincoln administration. We can imagine that the moniker the Hangman really stung Lincoln because it personalized the decisions, the bloody decisions that were already taking place on the worst battlefields of American history. And regardless of whether he was directly responsible or not, Lincoln unleashed devil dogs like General William Tecumseh Sherman, a terrifyingly efficient general who, in his march from Atlanta to Savannah, his march to the sea, implemented total war upon the South in Georgia, burning as he went. Generals like Sherman were able to do what they did specifically because Lincoln commanded them to break the South's will to fight.
Break their will so that they'll submit to your will.
And that'll move us finally into negative nickname number 3, an appearance-based insult where he was frequently mocked as the Ape. This one was used primarily by political cartoonists and vicious column opinion editors. But surprisingly, it was also used in the foreign press. By this time, throughout the Western world, political journalism had developed into something more akin to what we know now, where you can frequently open the front page of the most common newspapers and see a caricature of some of your favorite and least favorite politicians of the day. And it evolved just in time to target Lincoln, whose lanky stature and gaunt, sunken face lended themselves well to this kind of grotesque caricature. Artistic opponents would often portray him as simian or ape-like or somehow subhuman.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
And truly, unfortunately, there was that mix-in element of the most appalling racism given Lincoln's goals for the Civil War to free African American slaves, as the evidence of pathetic bigotry and partisan hack tactics. Truly, these nicknames tell us more about 19th century bullying than they do about substantive critiques of Lincoln himself. When it comes down to it, Lincoln is a prime example of how some of our best heroes have complicated legacies. His attacks on the Constitution and his willingness to resort to terrible violence stain an otherwise incredibly squeaky clean legacy. A legacy that would unfortunately follow him to the grave, as he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in the middle of his second term, and his vice president, number 17, Andrew Johnson, came into the White House. We'll be going over his 3 most popular positive nicknames next time. Once again, my name is Teddy Ebby. Thank you very much for watching today's video, and tune in next time.